A while back, I covered the mini-comics that came with the first wave of Mattel's Turtles of Grayskull action figures. When I explored that story, I casually mentioned Dark Horse Comics was releasing a 4-part miniseries that was sort of in continuity with the mini-comics. But things are either canon or not, right? Join me today as I explore the Turtles of Grayskull miniseries and its interesting place in the Mattel continuity. I already covered most of the backstory behind the panels in that previous video, so I'll be quick. Back in 2019, artist Freddie E. Williams II was approached by DC to do a crossover between TMNT and Masters of the Universe. Freddie suggested writer Tim Seeley, and the two brainstormed the project together. Unfortunately, the pandemic delayed the project so much that by the time it could be resumed, DC had lost the Motu license. Seeing how Dark Horse was focusing on the Netflix continuity at the time, Freddie considered the project dead and shared his concepts for it on social media. This may have influenced what happened next. Mattel reached out to Freddie to work on the mini-comics for a crossover action figure line between the two properties. Since these comics weren't written by Seeley, they had a completely different story from the one the creative team had brainstormed before. There was no way around this, as the comics had to sell the newly created action figures. The line was a success, and Mattel decided to finally make Freddie's childhood dream come true. They agreed to a PG-13 4-issue miniseries in collaboration between Dark Horse Comics and IDW Publishing, with Tim Seeley brought in as writer. Given the differences in the target audience, Mattel suggested ignoring the story from the mini-comics. Tim, who was in the mood to make everybody happy, decided to take advantage of the new characters in a different story that was sort of in continuity with the mini-comics. So, how did Tim manage to tell a new story without breaking the established continuity? Well, to begin with, everything was broken. It was sort of similar to what happened in the mini-comics, but clearly different. With Orko's help, the Turtles contacted Splinter and April from Eternia to tell them the story of how they ended up there. A story that was almost identical to the established continuity. Instead of getting inside the Technodrome in Dimension X, they explained that they followed a Mouser to the TCRI building, where they interrupted a magic spell from Skeletor and ended up in Eternia. There, they met Man-at-Arms, Roboto, and Teela, who were looking for He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe, who was also like a son to Duncan, Man-at-Arms. There was a new type of ooze, a purple mix between the mutagen they already knew and demon magic. This new substance turned whoever touched it into a mutated villain. After discovering Skeletor and his allies had established themselves near Castle Grayskull in one of those purple poison quarries, our heroes, including the Neutrinos, who were not in the mini-comics, went into battle. Unfortunately, a mutated He-Man proved too powerful and killed everyone. This was definitely not how the mini-comics ended, but we weren't the only ones who could tell. Renette, the apprentice timstress, showed up too late to prevent this ending. She had been trying to stop this for a while now. Somehow, all the time threads had been tangled in a knot at this point, and she was trying to figure out how to untangle them. It was almost like someone in the shadows was doing it over and over again. This someone may have also taken an ancient time scepter prototype, which would explain the time-traveling mess. The Time Scepter transported Renette to the origin of this chain of events, back to the Triceraton homeworld arena, where the Turtles faced Triceraton gladiators and He-Man. How the two parties ended up there was a story of its own. The Turtles were helping the Neutrinos defend their planet against a malignoid swarm invasion. On their way back, they detected an Utrum ship nearby. Knowing the Utrums and the Neutrinos were enemies, the Turtles stopped by a space station where they were ambushed by some of their biggest villains, like Maligna, Lord Dreg, and the Triceraton Prime Leader. The story of how He-Man ended up there was similar. He was at a state dinner as Prince Adam with his mom on planet Gyolan when he received a message from the sorceress saying that Skeletor had left Eternia in a collector ship. Just in case, He-Man followed the ship to the same space station, where he was captured by the Triceratons. Clearly, their villains had teamed up to get rid of them. After defeating the Triceratons, He-Man and the Turtles were chased by a monstroid. Renette helped them escape from the Triceraton homeworld and quickly brought them up to speed on who everyone was. It was important for her to avoid the usual crossover fight, since she needed to keep them separated if she wanted to untangle the time knot. She explained that she saw the events of He-Man killing everyone in battle in Lord Simultaneous's Gallery of Significant Events. She explained that she had been unable to untangle the knot several times, even losing a time scepter in the process. It was imperative for both parties not to team up, as this was the only sure way to prevent that ending. But it's hard to keep these worlds separated now. Therefore, Renette took a pragmatic approach. She took Prince Adam to New York to deal with Skeletor's influence in that world, while she took the Turtles to Eternia to find Shredder and Krang. This was well-intentioned, but with very little delay, Adam ran into Bebop and Rocksteady. He turned into He-Man to deal with them, but it was too late, as Casey Jones had single-handedly taken care of them. On Eternia, the Turtles were meant to stay away from Duncan and Teela, so as you probably already predicted, they crossed paths. As for Renette, she used the scepter to trace the knot's origin, which led her to the past, to a dojo in Japan. Just in time to see Hamato Yoshi feeding his pet rat, Splinter. How could this be the origin point of all this mess? Both the Turtles and He-Man were supposed to keep their worlds separate, something that could work on paper, but both had people who cared deeply about them and therefore couldn't help but mingle. Casey took He-Man to the lair, where he explained what happened and that he needed to deal with the Shredder by himself. The same situation happened in Eternia, where the Turtles figured out they had to invade Snake Mountain to deal with Skeletor's purple ooze without Duncan and Teela's help. Duncan let the Turtles go, but encouraged them to take some armor with them, which they did. Mikey even took a blonde wig. In New York, Splinter realized that, as powerful as He-Man was, he was going to be facing a ninja master, so he offered to train him for his battle. Back in the past, Renette eavesdropped on Yoshi and Saki arguing over whether to train a new warrior named Sekirio and let him join the Foot Clan. The name confused the heck out of Renette, who had never heard of this guy before. Could this be the reason for the time knot? While He-Man and the Turtles were set on dealing with their enemies, both experienced what life was like in each other's worlds. Lives that they actually considered for themselves. The Turtles realized that people wouldn't scream at their presence, because in this world, they weren't freaks. In a similar vein, Prince Adam couldn't help but wonder what his life as a teenager would be like on Earth, the planet his mother came from. A life without the responsibilities of the throne and the power, where he could go to parties, have fun, and find romance. But the lull didn't last long. April, Casey, Splinter, and He-Man converged at the TCRI building, where they were ambushed by Shredder and Beastman. And they weren't alone. They also had the conjoined two-bad version of Bebop and Rocksteady. Something similar happened to our heroes in a half-shell. Duncan and Teela investigated the disappearance of some of their warriors and determined they would find them in Snake Mountain. Therefore, they joined the Turtles in the fight. Upon arrival, they were ambushed by the two missing heroes, now turned into mutant villains, Moss Man and Ram Man. Next to them were also Skeletor and Krang. But none of this really mattered compared to what was taking place in the past. Renette continued investigating the situation until she discovered that Sekirio had been claimed by both Skeletor and Saki, confirming that he was very likely the source of the time knot. After learning that Sekirio was leaving the clan to go join Skeletor, Saki left a snake mark on Sekirio's chest. To confirm her suspicions, Sekirio revealed himself to Renette, now going by the name of Ninjor, and in possession of her missing time scepter. It turned out that all of this was Ninjor's plan to get revenge on everyone who slighted or shamed him. He stole the time scepter from Renette while she was admiring some Eternian ducks, then manipulated the timeline to create the purple mutagen that would force He-Man to kill everyone. The more Renette tried to keep the knot untangled, the more manipulations Ninjor made to keep their paths crossing and leading to the same result. Realizing her plans were pointless, Renette returned to Castle Grayskull in the present, where all the characters were now facing each other. With the truth about Ninjor revealed, the villains realized that they had both wronged him. We already know about Saki's marking, but what did Skeletor do? Well, he promised to teach him how to use absolute power, but after he failed against He-Man, Skeletor sent him packing. Something about Ninjor still didn't make much sense. If both Saki and Skeletor had stopped training Ninjor, how did he get so efficient? Out of nowhere, a portal opened above He-Man, dropping purple ooze on him and turning him into the most powerful mutant in the universe. While the Turtles, Teela, and Casey tried to keep He-Man under control, Ninjor showed up to face his former mentors. He used the purple ooze to turn into what he always wanted, a dragon. Fortunately, not everyone was engaged in battle, which was the key to untangling this knot. Splinter tapped into the wisdom of the Power Sword and used it to remind He-Man who he really was, undoing his mutation. This was an interesting discovery, and to manipulate the scales in their favor, the castle's sorceress granted April mystical powers that enabled her to uncover the truth behind the new purple ooze. After saving Shredder and Skeletor from Ninjor's attack, she explained that the new ooze didn't evolve its victims. It infected them with black magic. It was essentially a havoc magic virus. The virus attacked its host as a cancer, feeding on their fear. For He-Man, that fear was his power being used to hurt the people he cared for. But for Ninjor, the fear was not being able to escape from himself. She revealed that Ninjor had trained himself over time, which always ended with him being disappointed in himself and killing his teacher. He did this over and over until he achieved his current state. Ninjor was his own greatest enemy. In his moment of weakness, Ninjor wasn't strong enough to fight back against the coordinated attack of the Turtles and He-Man. Using his sword, He-Man reversed all the effects of the purple ooze on all its victims. Shredder and Krang returned home, and Lord Simultaneous asked the sorceress to imprison Ninjor in the nexus of all realities, making her an honorary timestress. By closing the loop, Renette untangled all the other versions of this story. It was almost as if nothing ever happened at all. But seeing how the events gave its protagonists some experiences, connections, and lessons, she decided to leave the original story from the mini-comics as its own timeline. A timeline that would continue into the Reptile Wars. But that's a story for another day. So, now you know. Seeley managed to do his own loop without affecting the canon from the Mattel mini-comics. A recurring theme in this story was how our heroes were empowered by those who cared for them to risk their lives for the greater good. On the other side of the mirror, we have Ninjor, whose teachers disappointed him and left him with no one who believed in him. At the end of this story, the Reptile Wars line was teased, and Ninjor, who was released as an action figure in the next wave, was a part of it. But, as I said, I'll cover those mini-comics in a future video. Can you relate to Prince Adam and the Turtles in this story? Do you also have someone in your life who believes and empowers you? If so, have you let them know how influential they are to you? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the sewers.